Hey fellow watchers of the Multiverse, welcome to yet another exciting episode of If I Had Written. This series dives into cancelled projects, pre-writes, rewrites, and custom projects, giving you a glimpse of what might have been and what could be. Today, we begin our journey with If I Had Written Sam Raimi Spider-Man 9. If you haven't watched the previous parts yet, make sure to check them out first in the playlist to get the full story. We'll be rolling out tons of new fan fictions and original stories, and there's so much more to come. By supporting us on Patreon and Substack, you'll get exclusive perks and behind-the-scenes content. Plus, you'll be helping us fund the production of Season 2 of our What If motion comic animations. Your support is crucial for us to continue creating high-quality content and bringing your favorite characters to life in new and exciting ways. Becoming a member means you'll get early access to videos, special updates, and the chance to support more amazing projects. Thank you for joining us on this epic journey through the multiverse. Stay tuned for even more incredible stories and adventures. Location: Kingpin's lair. Kingpin almost lost it, but this juicy information Kraven was offering to him sent chills of excitement down his spine. The criminal mastermind had hired the Hunter to destroy the Vulture and Spider-Man, while also retrieving the Venom symbiote. Kraven had done the latter, but only part of the former, as Spider-Man was still alive. This was why Kingpin was not eager to release the cash to him. However, Kraven had just offered to reveal the identity of the web-slinger to Kingpin, and he was rethinking his stance. With the information, he would get rid of Spider-Man forever. Kingpin took some time to think, and his henchmen were on alert because his next words would determine the fate of Kraven. If their boss did not like the idea, he would quickly order the execution of the Hunter, and even if the Hunter himself knew it. This was why all of Kingpin's henchmen tightened their hands on their guns. However, Kingpin smiled after a long, agonizing moment of thinking. Kraven had been so tensed up that he unconsciously heaved a little sign of relief. The criminal boss told Kraven that he had accepted his offer, because it was in line with what he had in mind. Suddenly, all his men released their grips on their weapons. Kraven was safe, for now. Kingpin then beckoned Kraven to come, as he wanted to tell him what he planned to use the symbiote for. Kingpin wanted to make Kraven a partner in the plan because he would need him to carry out an essential plan. Something that had to do with making Spider-Man's life miserable. Anything that he had to do will make Spider-Man suffer. "Count me in," Kraven said, as he walked along with Kingpin. Location: Vulture's lair. Peter felt so betrayed. He knew that he was a fool to have trusted Kraven, but he sincerely felt that the Hunter had changed. Peter knew that there was good in everyone, and he honestly thought that he had connected with that part of Kraven. However, after everything, he was just using them as a means to an end. Thankfully, Black Cat was there to comfort him. Peter realized that seeing good in everyone was not a bad thing, because it was evident in her. She was a villain too, but Peter had given her a second chance at life. And now, Black Cat had turned a new leaf. Peter was, however, now cautious because what Kraven had done to him. This was why he made a mental note to tell Mary Jane and Aunt May not to come back yet. Peter wanted them to be safe, especially because of the baby. However, as Peter and Black Cat wanted to make their way back, they discovered something shocking. The Vulture was still alive, but barely. Peter's blood got pumping, and so did Black Cat's. They did not know what to do, but Peter calmed himself down. He had picked up some very vital medical skills on the job, and he performed them on the Vulture. The web slinger was surprised that the police and ambulance had not already arrived at the scene of the crime. He then asked Black Cat to call the ambulance, but she stood, fixated, looking at him, as if she was in a trance. Peter then screamed out her name, and this seemed to break her out of the trance. She immediately rushed to carry out his instructions, while Peter continued tending to the Vulture, giving him CPR. He comforted him and told him to be strong, that he will not die. Within a few moments, Black Cat was back. She told Peter that she had called the ambulance and that they were on their way. Peter thanked her and continued tending to the Vulture. Black Cat was still fixated on Peter, and Peter made a mental note to ask her what the problem was later on. Suddenly, the Vulture started gasping, and Peter froze with fear. He figured that he was dying, but the Vulture was actually trying to talk to him. Peter bent down and strained his ears to hear what the Vulture was trying to say. What he heard broke his spirit and almost brought tears to his eyes. "I am sorry," the Vulture said to Peter. That single statement was enough for Peter to forgive him for all the wrongdoings. However, Peter was still cautious because of what Kraven just did to him. He thought that it was a possibility that the Vulture wanted to use his soft heart to enter his good books. However, Peter concluded that there was nothing that the Vulture could gain from doing this, because he was on the verge of death. Looking straight into his eyes, Peter assured him that he would survive this ordeal. The Vulture had disbelief and deep pain in his eyes, and the web-slinger could see that. Luckily, the sound of a siren broke the silence and the uneasy breathing of the Vulture. Peter signed a breath of relief, and together with Black Cat, they carried the injured Vulture outside. The ambulance swiftly parked, and attendants stepped out with their stretchers. Once they had the Vulture strapped in, Peter and the Black Cat took off. This was because Spider-Man did not want to wait around for the police officers. They had a tendency to make everything worse and did not want the whole stress. The cops would probably blame everything on him, and their rat race would start all over again with a fresh seal of vigor. As Black Cat and Peter made their way out, he could still feel the curious energy around her and could not make it anymore. "Okay, tell me, what is it?" Peter asked her, as he wanted to know why she was acting weird, even when he was tending to the Vulture. Black Cat snapped out of her trance, and this furthered Peter's curiosity. She then told him what she was so confused about, and it actually made Peter crack a smile. Black Cat was actually surprised that Peter had still helped the Vulture, irrespective of the fact that the villain had tried to unalive him and many other innocent people. Peter was now beaming, and this threw Black Cat off more. Then she also snapped and told Peter to stop teasing her, and this actually made him burst into laughter. Spider-Man laughed more than he had in a very long time. Black Cat just stood there looking confused and infuriated, but in a very cute way. She then settled into a pout, and Peter found this awfully cute. This was what made him put a hold on his laughter. After a few moments of catching his breath, he was finally ready to speak to Black Cat. Spider-Man started with a profuse apology while giving off a boyish smile. Then, he told Black Cat the reason he helped Black Cat was actually very dark. She claimed that she could handle it. Peter nodded and told her to come along, that he had quite a long story to tell her. With that, they moved out. Location? Chrysler Building. Peter sat down on the edge of the building with his mask off, and Black Cat had so many questions. She wanted to ask why they were here and what meaning the building had to Peter, but she was scared. This was because Black Cat could literally see tears in Peter's eyes, and she did not know what to do. "You can ask your questions," Peter whispered, and for some reason, this sent chills down Black Cat's spine. She then cleared her throat and asked what it means, what the tower held to him. Peter then gave her a mocking smile, and she really felt his pain. After some moments of the awkward and painful silence, Peter spoke. The web-slinger told her his story. Before he started, however, he told her that his story would answer his former one, why he saved the vulture. Peter told her about how he got his powers and how he lost his Uncle Ben. Almost immediately, he had carried the grief and heavy guilt and cried on this very same tower. Peter told her that this was why the Chrysler Building held so much meaning to him. Peter then went ahead to repeat the mantra to her. He repeated the very same statement that gave him courage and strength whenever the whole world was against him, whenever he had no one else to turn to, and was slowly or rapidly losing his way. It was this statement that helped Peter Parker get back up. The statement he told Black Cat was given to him by his Uncle Ben, and this was why it held so much meaning to him. When Black Cat heard the statement, she finally understood everything. Peter was carrying the weight of the whole city on his shoulders, and it scared her. The statement explained to Black Cat why Peter blamed and beated himself up whenever something went wrong in the city. However, she discovered something very tragic, and this made her respect Peter more. Black Cat could not even think how Peter would feel when he did all these things for the city and they treated him like a menace. She also deduced that this recent betrayal of Kraven had really hurt Peter, because he really gave out nothing but good and was constantly repaid with evil, betrayal, or hurt. Once she figured this out, she really had more respect for Peter and really started to care about his mental health. She really wondered if he was really okay, and something pushed her to ask. When she did, Peter looked up at her with tears in his eyes, and without even thinking, she quickly moved to hug him. Peter cried, but she was there to hold and comfort him as he let everything out. While he continued crying, Black Cat continued marveling at the amount of weight Peter had to bear because of the statement. She wondered if it actually had done more harm than good, if it was a mental debate that was going on in her mind. This was why the statement was constantly resounding in her head. With great power comes great responsibility. Location: Kingpin's lair. The boss loved Kraven's proposition. However, he decided that he would still have some use for him. He wanted to make him a partner in achieving his goal and completing his project. To be fair too, he would not have any need for Kraven if Peter had been eliminated. Because of this, Kingpin had to appreciate the smarts of Kraven, because he discovered that he would have been easily disposed of after he completed all of his assignments. Most likely, that was why he let Peter live, in order to continue being relevant to Kingpin. The boss appreciated that type of smarts, and that's why he did not eliminate the Hunter. Right now, he was leading Kraven to his laboratory. He wanted to disclose the main objective of his project and why he needed the symbiote. He had, however, given a secret signal to his henchmen to be on standby in case Kraven double-crossed him. When they finally reached the laboratory, Kingpin turned to catch the awe in Kraven's face before the Hunter quickly masked it. All first-timers had that look, because Kingpin had spent a lot of money to make it. After waiting for a few moments, he then went on to tell Kraven his plans. Kingpin wanted to use the symbiote to aid him in his quest. Kingpin told Kraven his quest, and he could notice the change in his expression. Everyone would feel that way if they had heard Kingpin's plans, so it did not bother him. However, something felt off about Kraven now. Kingpin had told Kraven that he had built a machine that could access the multiverse. This sounded impossible to Kraven, and if it wasn't Kingpin that said it, he would have bursted out laughing. This was because it sounded too unbelievable to have been a joke. However, Kingpin never joked. Kraven's head then became as if it was underwater. This was because he did not hear anything that Kingpin said after that. His mind was just working overtime on how to escape with the symbiote. Kingpin could not get his hands on it. This was because he knew that such things were not meant to be messed with. And that is why I need the symbiote. And it was as if it was the signal Kraven needed. He suddenly became on guard. They finally arrived at the location of the machine, and the hunter was in awe. Kraven had heard the moment of the engineers even before he saw it, and when Kingpin had told him of his plans, he thought that it would resemble a monstrous abomination. However, this was not the case. The machine looked in its peak. In front of it was a form of circles, and Kraven figured that this was for the portal for the multiverse. Currently, energy with variety of colors was swirling inside of it, and quite frankly, was very menacing. This was what Kraven used to escape, as he noticed that the guards' gazes were fixated on the circle of swirling colors. He immediately threw the symbiote into the air, and this alerted them. They immediately rushed to attach the cylinder containing the symbiote, but Kraven used this distraction to fight and knock out most of them. He was a master at this, and he displayed his skills beautifully. After he had dealt with most of the guards in proximity with him, Kraven proceeded to catch the cylinder before it met with the floor. Kingpin was already advancing towards him, and Kraven knew that the boss had more physical strength than him, so he decided to retreat. Besides, Kraven discovered that multiple other guards had started trooping in, plus the one he knocked out were gaining consciousness again. This was why he ultimately decided to retreat. Kraven ran as if his life depended on it, because it literally did. However, Kingpin had some cards up his sleeve. He immediately requested for a gun, and one of his henchmen hurled it to him. Kingpin told his men to stand down, and they did. As Kraven ran, he noticed that nobody chased him, and it was very strange. He immediately concluded that it was a trap, and that was why he chose to change his direction. However, what Kraven did not know was that this decision would be what actually saved his life. Kingpin changed the weapon up, but it was as if he changed everywhere. But because the atmosphere became almost electric, the hairs on his arms stood up, and all his henchmen had goosebumps. After the weapon had finished charging, he took aim and fired. However, Kingpin had changed direction almost immediately. The result was a beautiful one, as it was terrifying, a swirling mixture of colored energy, as if it was present in the machine, shot out and struck where Kraven was a split second ago. Immediately it did. A miniature black hole appeared, and if Kraven had been any second slower, he would have been sucked into it, into another multiverse, but in shredded parts. However, immediately it opened, it closed, and Kraven immediately understood why Kingpin needed the symbiote. He wanted to maintain the portal long enough for him to pass through it, and also protect himself. As he saw this, Kraven decided that Kingpin could never get his hands on the symbiote. Even as a villain, Kraven knew that there were some things that you do not just mess around with. After making this decision in a split second, and without giving Kingpin any time to recharge the weapon, Kraven jumped out of the hole in the building created by the multiverse weapon. The Kingpin was mad with rage. He was looking for something or anything to break and vent his anger on. However, even his impulse anger recognized that breaking the multiverse weapon would spell doom on everyone. So he carefully set it down before he started looking for a victim. Unfortunately, this came in the form of one of his henchmen, who ran down towards him. He told Kingpin that Kraven had also stolen the money, as well as the symbiote. This is what finally made him explode. The night was filled with the rageful screams of Kingpin and the cries of agony from that particular henchman. Location: Kraven's hideout. Kraven knew that he could not go back to his lair in the forest because Spider-Man could find him there, and worst of all, Kingpin would definitely be looking for him now. This made him find a makeshift shelter inside an abandoned building. The hunter had used his stealth skills to gather supplies, which would last him some weeks. His body was still trembling because of his close shave with the imminent death, but he was glad he made it out alive. However, little did he know that something was going to come up. Kraven started napping, but suddenly, he woke up. He was alerted by a very tiny sound. Even though most people would not have heard it, he was a hunter, and he knew that the possibility of it being dangerous was high. So because of this, he became very alert and armed himself. Within a few seconds, he heard footsteps, and from his honed hearing skills, he was able to tell that there were 3 men. Kraven did not know what 3 men wanted to do in an abandoned house such as this, but he knew that he would soon find out. He swiftly hid in the shadows and waited. The wait would have been agonizing for most people, but for Kraven, it felt like nothing. Finally, his waiting paid off, and 3 huge men walked into where he was. Kraven quickly sized them up and came up with a hypothesis. Standing before him, there were 3 shabbily dressed men, and that told him that they were probably homeless or living in poor conditions. However, when he saw the bag that they carried, he got very curious. This was short-lived though, as the men opened the bag and started retrieving huge sums of money. Kraven then understood. The 3 men were armed robbers, and this was their safe house for stashing their money. He quietly watched them and waited for them to leave while he concluded what to do. If the circumstances were different, Kraven would have beaten all of them and obtained their cash. However, he was currently on the run and he did not want to attract attention to himself. This was because he knew that if he had a confrontation with them, surely word would spread over the streets and reach Kingpin. This would then give the boss an idea of his exact location. So Kraven decided that after they had gone, he would sneak out of the building and with the symbiote and money. However, this changed when one of the more curious thugs noticed the symbiote cylinder. Kraven did a mental smack on the head. As the thug approached the cylinder, he knew that action must be taken. The thug only made it as far as using his fingertips to feel the cylinder. Immediately, he did, and Kraven bursted out and knocked him out with such speed that it was a blur. However, this alerted the other 2, and they quickly grabbed their 9mm pistols from their belts. They told him not to move or they would shoot. Kraven chuckled, because it was comical that the criminals were using the line that the officers used. However, just like he had never obeyed the line even when they said by cop, he did not now. Kraven quickly darted to a pillar, and the 2 men fired almost simultaneously. However, they both missed. The hunter had a particular strategy in mind, and he knew how to follow it through. Kraven wanted them to exhaust all of their current rounds in their pistols. This was because he planned to strike when they were reloading. Even though he knew that he could have taken on the situation much faster, he wanted a little more fun. The hunter wanted to play with his prey. This was why Kraven's laughter echoed off of the walls of the buildings as he darted between pillars in order to dodge the bullets. Kraven's amusement was heightened when he heard the grunts of frustration coming out from the mouths of the 2 guards. However, he could sense something else. That something else was his signal to attack. Kraven sensed fear. As the hunter, Kraven had been able to actually sense fear in his prey. He used this to torture and play with them for his delight. Also, when Kraven sensed this at a very heightened level, it meant that it was time to go for the kill. Sure enough, he soon heard the click of the pistol, signifying that they had run out of shots. It was time. As they struggled to reload the bullets, Kraven rushed at them. They were not ready. The hunter made little work of them, and he soon had them by their knees. He then started considering killing them and froze when he discovered that it was unlike him to even consider something like this. However, this gave one of the thugs a window to attack, and he took it. The thug latched an uppercut at Kraven's jaw, but the hunter had quick reflexes. He moved his face out of harm's way, but unfortunately, he discovered that this was a feint. The thug used his head on Kraven's guts, and this sucked the air from his lungs. The hunter immediately fell to one of his knees, and his face was quickly met with the knee of the second thug who had recovered. Kraven was now on the floor with a broken and bleeding nose, but his mind was unsettled. He was scared that Peter had started influencing him, that he had started turning into a hero. The realization that he had actually stopped Kingpin from getting the symbiote suddenly popped up in his head. This was because the reason he had done so was because he did not want the city to get destroyed by Kingpin's project. The fact that he did something to protect the city unnerved him. So while the thugs were beaten down on Kraven, his mind were pondering on these things. However, he suddenly concluded that he was no hero, he was a villain, and he would not change for anyone. Kraven convinced himself that Peter was not influencing him, and that he had killed his feelings of sympathy and empathy. As he said through this, a small part of his mind disagreed with him, but Kraven ignored this. Once he had gotten his mind straight, he quickly got up and ran down his wrath on the two thugs. All their efforts had nothing on him, and he showed that to them. Kraven proved to them why he was called the Ultimate Warrior. After disposing of them, he then retrieved the symbiote cylinder and his bag of cash. As a reward and a payment for a scuffle he had with the thugs, he also took the bag of money that they came with. Because he was on the run and he knew that he had to leave this place, because the neighbors and bypassers must have probably heard the gunshots and scuffle. He was even surprised that the cops hadn't already arrived. Also, aside from that, Kraven knew that when the thugs wake up, they would definitely tell their strange tale on the streets, and it would ultimately reach the ears of Kingpin. This meant that very soon, the abandoned building would be flooded with henchmen of the boss. In the end, Kraven had not been able to kill the thugs, and it hurt him because it meant that he was indeed turning soft. Location: Peter's apartment. Peter had a nightmare and he woke up suddenly. However, he was still shocked to see Black Cat standing in front of him. He quickly did a backflip and landed on his ceiling. This actually made Black Cat laugh because Peter was wearing just shorts with his cute little spiders. Peter suddenly realized this and he landed on his bed, and he quickly tried to cover up his shorts with his bed sheets. He then demanded why she was in his room, but she had a very responsible explanation. She explained that Peter was literally screaming, and she ran to check in on him. Spider-Man decided that her story checked out because Mary Jane had confirmed that he in fact did scream when having a very intense nightmare. What was funny now was that Peter could not remember what the nightmare was about. He just remembered running for his life as the Venom symbiote was sucking him in the form of a portal. Peter then thanked Black Cat for checking up on him because it really meant a lot to him. "Do you want to talk about it?" Black Cat asked, but he immediately declined. Peter had realized that he and Black Cat had gotten so close recently, but he figured that it was very dangerous for a number of reasons. The first was that he was still insecure after the stunt that Kraven pulled, so he was now treating Black Cat with the long stick in case she turned on him in the future. This was so that he would not feel any pain or even feel broken. Even though Black Cat had been nothing but good and open to him since he had saved her, he was still cautious. The second reason was that he didn't really know anything about her. Even though she had told him her background, Peter had more skin than her. This was because she also knew Peter and where he lived. She knew the faces of Mary Jane and Aunt May, the two most important people in Peter's life. The point was that she had way more information about Peter than he had over her. The last reason was Mary Jane. Peter knew that she would not condone to the amount of closeness he currently had with Black Cat. What troubled him was that he could not say with all sincerity that nothing was going on. This was why Peter decided that he had to withdraw from her in some sort of way. Somehow, Black Cat understood his unwillingness to share his nightmare, and she did not push it. However, suddenly a tremor passed the city. It was so faint that most people did not notice it. Peter and Black Cat were among the few people that noticed the tremor. Peter quickly jumped up and he was getting ready to go and check it out. However, Black Cat quickly stopped him. She told him to calm down and relax. Black Cat told Peter that she should go, while he tried to get some rest. According to her, he had already stressed himself both mentally and physically. This was why he needed his rest. Peter tried protesting, but he soon found out that his body was equally against him because he was very exhausted. He saw reason with what she told him, but the only thing that was holding him back from sending her on the mission was that he still did not trust her that much because of the Kraven incident. However, Black Cat continued arguing. Her voice was soothing. Peter knew that he had lost the battle. However, he told her to quickly report back and alert him if something was very serious. She promised to do so, and he relaxed back into his bed. Black Cat quickly and gently tucked him in, and an image of Mary Jane angrily flashed through Peter's mind. A jolt of fear went down his spine. He was too sleepy to protect or say anything. Peter quickly fell asleep, and Black Cat looked over at him in his peaceful state. The more time she spent with Peter, the more respect she had for him. Peter had wanted to leap out and check in on the faint tremor because it could have meant that somebody, maybe people, were in danger. He did so without even thinking about his mental or physical health. This fact scared Black Cat as she wondered how much he was willing to sacrifice. As Black Cat looked at Peter, she felt the urge to move over and give Peter a kiss on the face. She wanted to protect Peter and make sure that he never suffered again. However, as soon as the thought came, it disappeared because she remembered that Peter had a wife, Mary Jane. With the sign, Black Cat dressed up in her superhero suit and jumped out of the window. She started taking the general location of where she had felt the tremor come from. Hopefully, no one was hurt, and it was a false alarm. However, what Black Cat did not know was that the tremor had spread throughout the city after Kingpin had fired the multiverse weapon in an attempt to destroy Kraven. Location: Kingpin's lair. Kingpin was still mad and furious, brutalizing one of his henchmen, and he had done very little to appease him. He still could not get his head around the fact that Kraven had gotten the best of him. The hunter stole both the symbiote and also the money. He decided the only way he could regain his composure was for Kraven to be captured and brought back to him. Only then would his rage be mitigated. His henchmen knew that this is their subconsciousness, and this was why they were working overtime. They knew that the faster they got Kingpin back in a good mood, the better for all of them. This was because working with Kingpin in this type of rageful mood was very suicidal. So, this was why his henchmen had started searching places. They had also gone to Kraven's lair in the jungle, but nothing was discovered as expected. However, they got information, and this made them excited. A group of thugs had been attacked by a very fast and incredible mysterious person. This obviously meant that this was Kraven. The fact that it happened in an abandoned house meant that it was definitely him. Once one of the henchmen got the news from the streets, he got very excited and told his boss. However, he was sent on a suicidal mission. He was told to go and deliver the message directly to Kingpin. He almost fainted on the spot. The henchman's name was Cletus Cassidy, and his boss had literally sent him as a sacrificial lamb. Cassidy knew that he could not back out because they would definitely come after him. He then tried to plead with his boss, but they fell on deaf ears. Cletus was the sacrificial lamb that would serve in appeasing Kingpin, and he knew this. He also knew that going into Kingpin's office, he had less than 1% chance of making it out alive, and without any injuries. However, he then decided to do it. Cletus did not have anywhere else to go. Taking a deep breath, Cletus went into Kingpin's office. After he went in, his boss, a high-ranking henchman, knew that he would not come out the same. However, he was about to be disappointed. A few minutes later, Cletus came out without a scratch. Kingpin was in such a rageful mood that he actually wanted to devour the person who stepped into his office. However, once a skinny-looking man walked in, he was actually thrown off. When he saw how the man shook, he was very amused. The henchman Cletus Cassidy told Kingpin about the information he got from the street. Kingpin actually calmed down for a while and took his time to compose himself. After a while, he asked the henchman what he should do, whether they should search the building or not. This was because Kingpin was actually curious in what he was saying. Cletus was completely taken unaware. Kingpin could see the shock in his eyes and how he struggled to compose himself and his expressions. This intrigued Kingpin the most and surprisingly made him temporarily forget about his anger. Cassidy then told Kingpin that it would be foolish to go and search the building because Kraven would have already been long gone. He told Kingpin that it would even alert the cops and the citizens more. Even though they had bought off the cops, Cassidy told Kingpin that it would be wise to do things in the shadows. After saying all of this to Kingpin, Cassidy started crying for his life and his heart. He did not want to be next. The funny thing was that Cassidy had heard that Kingpin always wasn't like this. Something tragic happened that changed his life for good. It was whispered that the incident had been so grievous that it scarred him for life. Kingpin mulled over the thoughts in his head and finally decided. He told Cassidy to inform the other henchmen to stand down and to continue searching for any trace of Kraven. What you also think about my actions when Kraven escaped, Kingpin asked Cletus. And he saw that the henchmen knew it was a trap. There were no answer that did not possess some risks. If Cletus Cassidy commended Kingpin, he would know he was lying because the boss knew that he had acted rashly. If he criticized Kingpin, then he would literally be committing suicide. Kingpin figured that the safest way out was for Cassidy to commend his actions, as any other henchman would do, and actually dared to criticize Kingpin. The only reason the boss did not immediately rush at him was because of the way he did it. Cassidy told Kingpin that using the multiverse gun was not wise, because it would attract the attention of the city, and possibly Spider-Man. When Kingpin heard that name, he immediately had a painful flashback. However, the trembling and shaking of Cassidy took Kingpin's mind off of his memories. Cassidy's heartbeat could be literally heard in Kingpin's office as he stared daggers at him. Those were the most agonizing moments of the henchman's life, and he could have done anything to make it end. After what seemed like an eternity to Cletus, Kingpin finally steered. The funny thing that was, Kingpin knew that he had acted rashly because of the rage that he had, and he wanted someone to actually tell him that. Kingpin was somewhat glad that he had found someone who was not totally scared of him, as Cletus Cassidy could come in very handy in the future. Kingpin needed someone he could trust to give him honest opinions and still be very respectful alongside being afraid of his might. This was where Cassidy fit in perfectly. There's something about you though, Kingpin told Cassidy. About this statement, he proceeded to ask him if he would like to be his personal assistant and bodyguard. Cletus was beyond shocked and unsurprisingly, he was speechless. Kingpin knew that Cassidy was an interesting fellow, but he also figured that he could think for himself, and he respected that. In other circumstances, the henchmen would have woken up in a hospital, or never would have been advised and criticized Kingpin. However, the boss wanted someone around who could give him honest opinions without fear. Other henchmen were always agreeing with Kingpin and his actions because of fear, and it irritated him. Even though Cassidy was literally trembling in his presence, Kingpin was impressed by this. After this, he dismissed him. Cassidy left the office and came out in one piece, to the shock of the other henchmen. The first words that left his mouth shocked everyone even more. Showing a huge grin, Cletus told everyone that he was now their superior, but after their initial shock, they started laughing at the top of their lungs. This actually disturbed Kingpin right in the office, and they did not know it. However, when the Kingpin got out of the door, he saw that Cletus had sort of taken care of things in a way. He had knocked out one of his senior henchmen. When Kingpin saw this, he was very impressed. When his men saw him standing behind Cletus, they all stood erect. Then Kingpin proclaimed him to be promoted over them, right there and then. The shock on their faces could not be hidden, and it pleased Cassidy. Location: Kraven's new hideout. Kraven was at a crossroads. He did not know what to do next. The hunter knew that he wanted to stop Kingpin, but he did not know how to go about it. However, one person that knew who would have an exact idea of what to do was Spider-Man. However, his ego was too big for that. Kraven did not want to go back begging Spider-Man, even though he knew that the web slinger would help him immediately. He mentioned that the whole city and the world was at stake. He had too much of an ego for that. Kraven had been feeling conflicted, and this disturbed him. He now felt like he was no longer a villain, that he had now become a hero. Kraven felt like Peter had started rubbing off on him, and for some reason that irritated him. He was not used to being influenced by another person because normally he was the one doing the influencing. As earlier stated, he was surprised that he was now the one saving the city from Kingpin, when he was even supposed to be working with the boss. Kraven seriously did not know how things had gotten this far, because he just acted on impulse. Now, it felt like his soul and spirit were literally wearing the costume of Spider-Man. This made him remember the time he wore Peter's costume and wreaked havoc on the city. However, this time he was playing a different ball game. As Kraven sat and thought, suddenly he heard the sounds of cars parking outside, and he knew who they were. Kingpin's men were searching for him, and this was surely another batch of people, but he knew that he could not run from them now. From the sound of cars, he quickly stumbled that there were 3 cars. This made him assume that there were no less than 15 persons coming in to inspect the building. Kraven quickly grabbed his weapon and prepared to fight. He was not hiding in the shadows like last time. Kraven had set traps around the buildings, and he knew that they would help to even his chances of survival. But he could not place all of his trust on them. He had to be ready for anything that could happen. Once Kingpin's henchmen entered, he heard an agonizing scream from one of them, and this meant it was his signal to attack them. With the swiftness of a falcon, he moved in on them. After a very intense showdown, Kraven the Hunter had finally put an end to all of them. However, this was not done without any damage to himself, as he had sustained a gunshot wound. Kraven was currently nursing the bullet wound on his shoulder. He was doing it as swiftly as possible because he knew that reinforcements were on their way. He wanted to leave the hideout as soon as possible because he was in no condition to fight anymore. When he finished, he quickly grabbed the symbiote and his bag of cash. Then suddenly, an idea suddenly hit him. Kraven figured that he could actually hide in plain sight, in a hotel or a motel. He was now very rich, for crying out loud. Kraven also discovered that he can employ henchmen of his own with the money. As a hunter, he really did not have needs for money because he preferred the natural way of things. Kraven just accepted Kingpin's deal because of the thrill of the chase and hunting down a person. However, he had now seen a use for the money, and would use it inadequately. "In your face, Peter," Kraven screamed mentally, as he no longer had to think about going to beg the web-slinger. He could now defeat Kingpin by himself without the aid of Spider-Man. This was what he ultimately decided to do. He could not go back to Peter. That would hurt his pride. Kraven decided that he would train his henchmen, and then plan a surprise attack on Kingpin. His aim would be not to defeat the boss, but to actually destroy the machine. Kraven knew that even without the symbiote, that Kingpin would still find a way to power up that machine. This was why he wanted to destroy it. Because of his sharp skills, Kraven heard cars coming towards the abandoned building, and he figured that it was the reinforcements. He quickly jumped out of the building and made his way to his next hideout. He would surely make Kingpin pay. Location: Kraven's new lair. Kraven had carried out all of his plans, and it was now time for action. He had bought a warehouse and hired a lot of henchmen. Even though there was no time, he had tried teaching them some little skills, and they soaked it all up. However, he decided that they would attack tonight, because something in his bones told him that it had to be today. Kraven could not give Kingpin another day or time, because it was too dangerous. As if to confirm his thoughts, one of his most trusted informants, who was also a spy for him on Kingpin, walked in. He told Kraven that Kingpin had engineered a new symbiote to enable the machine to work. He told Kraven that he needed to strike tonight, and the only weapon that could neutralize the fake symbiote was the Venom symbiote. Even though this sounded a little off to Kraven, he knew that he could trust the secret informant. He then agreed and gave the orders to all of his henchmen to get ready to storm Kingpin's lair. After he had done this, he gave the permission to the spy to go back to his duty post. In case anything else happened, immediately the spy walked out of Kraven's office. He had a sinister smile on his face. The plan had worked. Kraven would be walking right into a trap because he had just conversed with Kingpin's right-hand man, Cletus Cassidy. Location: Kingpin's lair. It was an ambush, and the hunter discovered it was too late. When he saw Cletus fighting on Kingpin's side, he knew that he had been set up. Kingpin was in a jovial mood, and the hunter planned to capitalize on that. This was because Kingpin believed he had already won, as Kraven and his men were surrounded. However, Kraven needed more time. He asked Kingpin to explain to him how he pulled everything off, and the big man was more than happy to explain it. He told Kraven how he heard of him needing henchmen from the streets, and how he filled most of the slots with his own. He also told him on how he had sent Cletus Cassidy to act as a double-crosser, but Kraven was tired of hearing more. His package had arrived. Suddenly, strange people flooded the building and started wreaking havoc through Kingpin's men. Kraven had come extra prepared. This angered the boss, and he went into combat with Kraven. Kraven and Kingpin fought because Kraven did not want him to tap into a destructive power and the source of energy such as the multiverse. Kingpin and Kraven fought, and the fight led them to the gateway of the machine. Kraven tried to shut it down, but he failed. However, their fight ended up causing havoc in New York. This was because Kingpin had thrown Kraven into the controls of the machine, and it started to malfunction. This powered up the machine, but as it began to open, it started ripping the fabric of reality, and a massive explosion happened, causing the building windows to completely shatter. Kraven was now very alarmed, because he knew that there was no way Peter could have missed the blast. Also, Kraven knew that he was not in a mental state to see Spider-Man yet. Location: Peter's apartment. As Peter suddenly heard a loud blast, and from his building, he could see where it came from. He was horrified to see it. The explosion and the damage was so loud that Peter ended up sensing it before he even saw it. Black Cat immediately came into his room to make sure she was not imagining anything. He and Black Cat began to watch as the sky started turning black. They were very scared. However, Black Cat had something more on her mind. When she had gone over to check out the cause of the tremor, she had seen that it came from Kingpin's lair. However, she had kept it to herself. She did not want to burden Peter with it, but now she told him, and he was very furious. He told her that he should never have trusted her. After this, he leapt out the window, fully clad in his Spider-Man suit, as he wanted to confront Kingpin. Spider-Man and Black Cat ended up going to Kingpin's lair, and they were not prepared for what they saw. They witnessed Kingpin and Kraven fighting each other. However, what happened next shocked them to the core. Kingpin kicked Kraven into the portal, and Peter swung down to save him, but he could not make it. He screamed out Kraven's name, and the hunter looked at him with tears in his eyes, as his hand slowly raised, telling Peter to stop. Peter looked at him, and he said no, as the portal started ripping Kraven's skin apart. Kraven smiled, as he was no more. Spider-Man was blinded by tears and fury. Suddenly, he and Black Cat now saw Kingpin with the symbiote. Peter's plan was to go straight at him, but Black Cat restrained him. Kingpin then mocked Peter. He asked him whether it was painful to lose a friend. It took all of Black Cat's strength to stop Peter from jumping on the boss. Kingpin then released the symbiote and allowed it to merge with him. Kingpin now saw the truth, as the symbiote showcased certain memories of Peter Parker. With the symbiote during their time together, Kingpin now knew Spider-Man's secret identity and many other things. Spider-Man realized Venom, or a version of him, was now back, and he looked at Black Cat, and the two were shocked at a revelation. In his symbiote state, Kingpin revealed his real goal and mission. The boss revealed that his family was killed in a bombing at the bridge during Peter's battle with the Green Goblin. He stated that Spider-Man had swung past them while battling Goblin on the bridge. He revealed that's why he was angry at Spider-Man, and he told Spider-Man that with the machine, he would open up a portal to a new world and find his family. Spider-Man could not take it anymore. He was still mad over the death of Kraven, but now he had the guilt over what had happened to Kingpin. However, he decided that things could not go on like this. Peter quickly told Black Cat to cover and protect him from the other henchmen while he combated Symbiote Kingpin. Symbiote Kingpin and Peter got into a fight while the scientists were trying to stabilize the portal. Cletus Cassidy was one of them, and he actually began operating the portal, trying to locate a universe. This was all according to Kingpin's plan. Cletus knew that if he played his cards right and Kingpin left, he might actually be in charge of his crime empire. This was why he was trying so hard to ensure that he did. Kingpin ordered all of his henchmen to stand down. He wanted to defeat Spider-Man with his own bare hands. He also invited Black Cat into the party. This was because he felt excessive power running through him as a result of being merged with the symbiote. So Kingpin wanted to use this opportunity to get revenge on Spider-Man for his family, and on Black Cat for double-crossing him. After he assumed a fighting stance, he beckoned on two of them to come at him, and they did. A few moments later, The stronger person was obviously Kingpin. He had two of them beaten down in strength and even agility and speed to an extent. This was the result of the black suit. Black Cat was frustrated and acted on impulse. She charged at him alone amidst the screams of Peter not to. Immediately she did, and Black Cat was tripped and held by her neck by a symbiote tendril. Kingpin then went in deep laughter. Soon after that, he tried to throw her into the portal, but Spider-Man jumped in the way and saved her, using his webs and quick reflexes. After this, he carried her up the rooftop using his webs. Peter told Black Cat to escape, quickly. Her face held the expression of disbelief, but he quickly explained. He told her to save herself. Peter also begged her to make sure his wife and aunt were safe. However, she was still reluctant to leave. Black Cat pleaded with Spider-Man to escape with her, but he declined. He told her that he had to pay the price for what he did, but she tried her best in convincing him that it was not his fault but the goblins. She was pretty sure that those fell on deaf ears because Peter was still going to go and confront Kingpin. However, inside, the machine started to misbehave, and everybody was scared except Kingpin. Cletus told Kingpin that they needed to shut everything down before it all exploded. Kingpin did not mind. He gave orders that the machine should continue to run. Cletus was still begging Kingpin at the same time to stop everything, but the boss had enough. This was why he grabbed Cletus by his collar, and he was about to punch him or possibly kill him. Fortunately, as he was about to unleash his wrath, Spider-Man swung in and held onto the large hand of Symbiote Kingpin. Peter then used this opportunity to land punches on him. However, Kingpin threw him into the wall and stumbled near the portal. The portal had sort of stabilized, and he wanted to pass through. The symbiote was meant to be a shield, so he could pass through to another universe unharmed. However, as he wanted to pass through, a bruised Cletus pressed some buttons at the controls, and the portal disrupted for a moment. The energy cut half of the symbiote off Kingpin. This was very frightening because it would have been Kingpin's skin instead. The cut-in-half symbiote flew towards the ground, and the remaining one in Kingpin expanded to cover his whole body again. It was at this time that Spider-Man came at Kingpin again. Kingpin and Spider-Man fought for a bit longer before he grabbed Peter and held him towards the portal. This was a very difficult thing to watch, as the portal started ripping apart Peter's skin and his costume. When he got badly injured, Kingpin threw him to the ground. Kingpin then continued to walk towards Peter, as he was about to finish off Spider-Man, who was trying to crawl away. Peter looked straight ahead and saw the symbiote, which was cut off from Kingpin earlier. Even though he did not like the idea, he knew that he had to fight fire with fire. Peter quickly outstretched his hand and grabbed the symbiote, and it went all over his body, healing him and saving him. The portal began to destabilize, and Peter and Symbiote Kingpin fought more, until Spider-Man landed one final blow, and it sent Kingpin back towards the outside of the portal. Since the portal was still unstable, it started ripping apart the symbiote and himself. Kingpin suddenly lost the symbiote, and he tried to tell them to shut the portal down, but they could not hear him because there was so much chaos. Cletus could hear him though, but he did not move an inch to save Kingpin. Peter then tried to save Kingpin, but the boss looked at him with a tear in his eye. And Spider-Man yelled. He knew that Kingpin's ego was too big. Kingpin would rather die than let Spider-Man save him. This was exactly what he did. Kingpin killed himself as he fell into the portal fully. This caused his entire body to get ripped apart. The symbiote from Peter also got sucked into the portal because the portal suddenly turned into a huge vacuum. It started sucking everything in until it suddenly overheated and something interesting happened. The portal caused the color of the symbiote, which it sucked in, to change, and then a massive explosion happened. It was carnage everywhere. The portal suddenly got destroyed, and the transformed symbiote went into Cletus Cassidy. The symbiote's new color was red. And that is going to be it for today's If I Had Written Spider-Man 9. Now, what did you think of Spider-Man 9? Let me know in the comments down below. And again, I do want to say thank you so very much for all of the latest support on the channel. It just really means a lot to me, my fellow watchers of the multiverse. And again, all I can really say is thank you. Again, I'm really shocked with the way that things are going, and I'm very excited for all of the new series that we're doing on Patreon, that we're doing for the YouTube community, for you guys, for everybody in between. And I do want to say this, I do want to say that make sure to check out the Substack and also check out the Patreon, as well as checking out by joining a member. Would you want to become a member? I mean, it really depends on the perks, but I think we got some really great perks here, and all I can say is the bottom of my heart, thank you so very much. But if you guys do enjoy these videos and would like to see more, I would highly recommend that you click that big red button, as it really goes a long way to the Miss Lepore community. We get back into the algorithm, we get a ton more people here, we can do so much more together. And I've got a lot of requests. A lot of people want to see more of these episodes become animations, and it's not as easy as it looks, my fellow watchers. It's very tough to get these things done, especially with the very low budget that we are here at Miss Lepore Productions. So if you guys would like to see any of these episodes or segments, cut down episodes, we could definitely do it, but we definitely need that little, the backbone, the support to make it happen. So if you're able to do that, we would highly appreciate that you check out any of these different perks, as it goes a long way. But again, I really know that if you can't do that, it's completely fine. It's completely fine. The support, you even just watching this video right now, really means a lot to me. So again, if you can't support, don't worry about it. But if you can, we got so many different perks on so many different things, and that is something that you should do on your own to check out. But again, thank you so very much, and I will see you in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 10. But take care, my fellow watchers, and have an amazing day.